Please, she whispered, her fingers trembling as she held the tray of champagne glasses. Please, I just need this job. I have nowhere else to go. The head caterer, a woman with sharp cheekbones and sharper eyes, stepped closer until her breath was hot against Margot's face. I don't care what you need. You spilled champagne on a guest. A guest. Do you have any idea who these people are? Margot's throat tightened. She knew exactly who these people were. That was why her hands wouldn't stop shaking. That was why, when she'd seen the familiar face across the ballroom, the face that had haunted her nightmares for 3 years, the tray had slipped. It was an accident, she managed, but her voice cracked on the last word. An accident that could cost me my contract with the Ashford family. The caterer snatched the tray from Margot's hands. You're done. Get out. And don't expect a reference. The words hit like a physical blow. Margot stumbled backward, her hip catching the edge of a stainless steel counter. Pain shot through her side, but it was nothing compared to the cold dread spreading through her chest. No job meant no rent. No rent meant the streets. And the streets meant he would find her. Wait, she said, reaching out. Please, I'll work for free tonight. I'll do anything, just don't. Security. The caterer's voice cut through the kitchen like a blade. 2 men in black suits appeared in the doorway. They were large, expressionless, the kind of men who asked no questions because they didn't care about the answers. Margot's stomach dropped. No, please, I'll leave on my own. You don't have to. But they were already moving toward her, and she knew how this would go. She'd be dragged through the service entrance, thrown into the alley like garbage, and tomorrow she'd wake up with nothing. Again. She closed her eyes, bracing for the rough hands on her arms. That won't be necessary. The voice came from behind the security guards, low, calm, and carrying an authority that made both men freeze mid-step. Margot's eyes flew open. He stood in the doorway like he owned it, which, she realized with a jolt, he probably did. This was the Ashford estate, and the man looking at her with those pale gray eyes was unmistakably in command of every person in this room. She'd seen him earlier, from across the ballroom. He'd been surrounded by men in expensive suits, all of them leaning in when he spoke, nodding at whatever he said. She'd noticed him the way you notice a storm on the horizon, with a mix of awe and the instinct to run. Now that storm was 3 feet away, and running wasn't an option. Mr. Ashford, the caterer said, her voice suddenly syrupy. I'm so sorry for the disturbance. This woman was just leaving. Was she? It wasn't a question. His gaze hadn't left Margot's face, and she felt it like a physical weight, assessing, calculating, missing nothing. She forced herself to meet his eyes. She'd learned a long time ago that looking away only made predators more interested, but something flickered in his expression, something that almost looked like curiosity. What's your name? He asked. The caterer stepped forward. Sir. She's nobody, just a clumsy server who... I wasn't talking to you. The words were quiet, but they landed like a guillotine. The caterer's mouth snapped shut. Margot swallowed. Margot Ellison. Margot? He said it like he was testing the weight of it. You spilled champagne on one of my guests. Yes, there was no point in denying it. I'm sorry, it was Vincent Carmine. The name hit her like ice water. Her breath caught, and she knew that he'd seen it. The flash of terror in her eyes, the way her whole body had gone rigid. His expression didn't change, but something sharpened in his gaze. You know him, he said. It wasn't a question. Margot's mind raced. Lie. She should lie. She should say no. She didn't know anyone by that name. She was just a clumsy nobody who deserved to be thrown out. But her voice wouldn't cooperate. Her voice, traitor that it was, came out thin and shaky as she said, I used to. The silence stretched between them. The caterer shifted uncomfortably. The security guards exchanged glances. Graham Ashford studied her for a long moment. Then he turned to the caterer. She stays. The woman's jaw dropped. But sir, she stays, he repeated, and she works the rest of the evening. Any problems, you bring them to me. Understood? It wasn't a request. The caterer nodded quickly, her face flushed with barely concealed fury. Graham's attention returned to Margot. When the event ends, you'll wait in the east drawing room. Someone will come for you. Before she could respond, before she could ask why, or what he wanted, or what exactly she'd just agreed to, he was gone, disappearing back through the doorway like smoke. Margot stood frozen, her heart hammering against her ribs. The caterer shoved a fresh tray into her hands. You heard him. Get back to work. But as Margot walked back into the glittering chaos of the ballroom, she couldn't shake the feeling that she'd just made a terrible mistake. Or maybe, whispered a small voice in the back of her mind, maybe this was the first right thing to happen to her in 3 years. The next 4 hours were agony. Margot moved through the crowd like a ghost, keeping her head down, her tray steady, her eyes fixed on anything except the dark-haired man laughing in the corner with a glass of scotch in his hand. Vincent Carmine. Vincent who had found her. Vincent who had walked into this party like he belonged here. Like he wasn't the reason she'd fled her hometown with nothing but a duffel bag and $200 in cash. Every time his laughter rang out across the room, her skin crawled. She could feel him looking at her sometimes. Quick glances, there and gone. Testing. Waiting. He knew she'd seen him. He knew she was scared. And he was enjoying it. By the time the last guests filtered out into the warm night air, Margot's hands were steady, but her insides were liquid. She helped the other servers pack up, avoided the caterer's poisonous glares, and then, when no one was looking, slipped away toward the east wing of the mansion. The drawing room was empty when she arrived. She stood in the middle of the Persian rug, surrounded by leather-bound books and old oil paintings, and wondered what exactly she was doing here. She should leave. She should walk out the service entrance, disappear into the city, start over somewhere new. Again. But where? With what money? And how long until Vincent tracked her down this time? Sit down. She spun around. Graham Ashford stood in the doorway, his bow tie loosened, his jacket gone. He looked less like a marble statue now, and more like a man who'd been working. Though what kind of work, she couldn't guess. He gestured to a leather armchair near the fireplace. Please. She sat. He crossed to a sideboard, poured 2 glasses of amber liquid, and handed one to her before settling into the chair across from hers. For a long moment he just looked at her. Not in the way Vincent looked at her, like she was something to be used, consumed, discarded. This was different. Clinical. Like she was a puzzle he was trying to solve. You're afraid of him, Graham said finally. Margot's fingers tightened on the glass. Don't. The word was quiet but firm. I saw your face when I said his name. You went white. Your hands started shaking. That's not how someone reacts to an old acquaintance. He leaned forward slightly. That's how someone reacts to a threat. She didn't answer. She couldn't. Vincent Carmine is a business associate of mine, Graham continued. Or he's trying to be. He came here tonight to propose a partnership. Property development, he called it. But I've learned to be cautious about the people I work with. His gray eyes held hers. And I've learned to pay attention when someone's afraid. Margot's throat felt like sandpaper. What do you want from me? The truth. Why? Because I don't do business with men who hurt women. His voice was even, matter of fact. And I think Vincent Carmine hurt you. The words cracked something open inside her. Something she'd kept locked away for 3 years, buried under survival mode and sleepless nights, and the constant, exhausting effort of staying invisible. Her eyes burned. She looked down at the whiskey in her hands. You don't know me, she said. I'm nobody. A server who spilled champagne. Why do you care? Because I asked you a question, and you couldn't lie to me. He paused. And because when you saw him across that room, you looked exactly like my sister did the night before she disappeared. Margot's head snapped up. Graham's expression hadn't changed. But there was something in his eyes now. Something old and heavy and carefully controlled. "That was 8 years ago," he said. "I never found out what happened to her. I never found out who she was running from." His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I won't make that mistake again." The silence stretched between them, filled with things neither of them was saying. Then Margot heard herself speak. "We were together for 2 years." Her voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. "In the beginning, he was everything. Charming, attentive. Made me feel like I was the only person in the world." She took a breath. "And then he wasn't." Graham didn't interrupt. He just watched her, patient and still. "It started small. Comments about my clothes, my friends, the way I talked. Then it got bigger. He wanted to know where I was every minute of every day. He checked my phone, my emails, my bank account. If I was 5 minutes late coming home, She stopped, her voice catching. "He'd what?" "He'd make me regret it." The words hung in the air. "I tried to leave," Margot continued, 3 times, but he always found me. He has people everywhere. Police, lawyers, landlords. He'd show up at my new apartment, my new job, smiling like nothing had happened, like we were still together and I'd just forgotten. She finally looked up at Graham. His face was unreadable, but she could see the tension in his shoulders, the way his hand had tightened on his glass. "The last time," she said, "he told me if I ran again, he wouldn't bother bringing me back. He'd just make sure no one ever found me." She swallowed. "So I disappeared. Changed my name, moved across the country, stayed off the grid. 3 years of looking over my shoulder every single day." Her laugh was hollow. "And then I walked into a catering job and saw him standing 20 feet away, drinking champagne like he owned the world." Graham was silent for a long moment. Then he set his glass down and stood up. He crossed to where she sat, and before she could react, he crouched in front of her chair so they were eye level. "Look at me," he said. She did. "He's not going to hurt you again." Margot shook her head. "You don't understand. He's connected. He has money, power. So do I." The words were simple, but the weight behind them made her breath catch. "I don't know what he told you," Graham said. "But Vincent Carmine is a bottom feeder who's been clawing his way up by stepping on people who can't fight back. He came here tonight because he thinks I'll help him go legitimate." His jaw tightened. He was wrong. "He won't stop," Margot whispered. "He never stops. Then we make him." "We?" Graham held her gaze. "You came to my house. You're under my roof. That makes you my responsibility." "I'm not your responsibility. I'm a stranger. A nobody who—" "Stop saying that." The sharpness in his voice made her fall silent. "You're not nobody," he said, quieter now. "You're someone who survived something terrible and kept going. That's not nothing. That's everything." He paused. "And I don't leave people to face monsters alone. Not anymore." Margot's vision blurred. She blinked hard, refusing to cry in front of this man she'd met 4 hours ago. "Why?" she asked. "Why help me?" Graham was quiet for a moment. Then, so softly she almost missed it. "Because no one helped her." He stood up, putting distance between them, and Margot understood that the conversation about his sister was over. Maybe forever. "There's a guest suite on the 3rd floor," he said, his voice businesslike again. "You'll stay there tonight? Tomorrow we'll figure out next steps." "I can't just—" "You can. You will." He looked at her. "Unless you'd prefer to go back out there alone." She thought of her empty apartment, the locks that wouldn't stop someone who really wanted to get in, the constant fear that had become her only companion. "No," she said quietly. "I wouldn't prefer that." "Good." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Margot." She looked up. "Whatever he made you believe about yourself," Graham said, "it wasn't true. None of it." Then he was gone. Margot sat alone in the drawing room for a long time, the whiskey untouched in her hands, and wondered if it was possible to feel safe again. She woke to sunlight streaming through windows she didn't recognize. For one disorienting moment, Margot didn't know where she was. The bed was too soft, the sheets too clean, the room too quiet. Then memory came rushing back. The party, Vincent, Graham Ashford, crouching in front of her and saying, "He's not going to hurt you again." And she sat up so fast her head spun. A knock at the door made her flinch. "Miss Ellison?" A woman's voice, professional and calm. "Mr. Ashford asked me to let you know that breakfast is served in the morning room whenever you're ready." Margot looked down at herself. She was still wearing last night's uniform, wrinkled, champagne-stained, smelling faintly of kitchen grease. "I don't have anything to change into," she said through the door. A pause. "There are clothes in the closet, ma'am. Mr. Ashford had them brought up this morning." Margot frowned. She crossed to the closet and opened it. Inside were half a dozen outfits, casual clothes in her size, simple and tasteful. Jeans, sweaters, a soft gray dress, even undergarments, tags still attached. She stared at them for a long moment, something uncomfortable twisting in her chest. She wasn't used to this, wasn't used to someone anticipating her needs, taking care of things before she even knew they needed to be taken care of. Vincent had given her things too, in the beginning. Expensive things, beautiful things, but they'd always come with strings, with expectations, with debt. She grabbed the jeans and a cream-colored sweater, refusing to think about what Graham Ashford might expect in return. The morning room turned out to be a sun-drenched space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a garden. Graham was already there, seated at the head of a long table, reading something on his phone. He looked different in daylight. Still sharp, still controlled, but there were faint shadows under his eyes that suggested he hadn't slept much either. "Sit," he said, not looking up. "Eat." Margot sat. A woman in an apron, housekeeper she assumed, appeared with a plate of eggs, toast, fresh fruit. More food than Margot usually ate in an entire day. "Thank you," she said. Graham set down his phone. "Sleep well?" "Better than I have in 3 years." Something flickered in his expression. Satisfaction, maybe, or approval. But it was gone before she could name it. "Good. We have things to discuss." Margot picked up her fork, then set it down again. "Mr. Ashford, Graham." She hesitated. "Graham, I need you to understand something. Whatever you're planning to do about Vincent, I can't be involved. He has resources I can't fight. If he finds out I'm here, if he finds out I talk to you, he already knows." The words landed like a stone. "What?" Graham's gray eyes met hers. "He called me this morning. Apparently, one of the servers at last night's event matched the description of a woman he's been looking for. His fiancée, he called you. Said you had some kind of breakdown a few years ago and ran off, and he's been trying to bring you home ever since." Margot's blood turned to ice. "That's not... I was never his fiancée. We were never engaged. He's lying. He's..." "I know." She stopped. "I know he's lying," Graham said. "Because I've spent the last 6 hours looking into Vincent Carmine, and what I found was illuminating." He reached for a folder on the table and slid it toward her. Margot opened it. Inside were documents, police reports, medical records, financial statements. All of them connected to women. Different names, different cities, but the same pattern. Relationships that started charming and turned controlling. Stalking. Threats. Disappearances. Her hands trembled as she turned the pages. 4 women, Graham said quietly. In the last 10 years, all of them were involved with Vincent Carmine. All of them tried to leave, and all of them vanished. He paused. "You're the only one who got away." Margot felt sick. She'd known Vincent was dangerous. She'd known he was capable of terrible things. But seeing it laid out like this, the pattern, The repetition, the sheer scope of it, made her realize something. She wasn't special to him. She wasn't the love of his life, wasn't an obsession he couldn't let go. She was just next. "He called you this morning," she said. "He knows I'm here, which means he knows he's exposed," Graham finished. "And men like Vincent don't react well to exposure. Then I have to leave." She stood up, her chair scraping against the floor. "If I disappear now, if I go somewhere, he'll never find me. Margot. Maybe I can still get out of this. Maybe... Margot." She stopped. He was standing now too, watching her with that steady gaze that seemed to see everything. "If you run," he said, "he will find you. He's been looking for 3 years. He's not going to stop because you switched cities again." He stepped closer. "The only way to end this is to end it. Completely." "What does that mean?" "It means we take away his power, his connections, his money, his reputation." Graham's jaw tightened. "It means we make him so toxic that no one will work with him, protect him, or cover for him ever again." "We?" She shook her head. "You keep saying we. But why? This isn't your fight. He's not after you. He wants to be in business with me. That makes it my fight." No, that's not." She struggled for the words. "You don't owe me anything. I showed up at your party by accident. I'm not your responsibility." Something shifted in Graham's expression. He crossed to her, close enough that she could see the flecks of blue in his gray eyes. "Then let me make it simple," he said. "I have spent 20 years building something. An empire, a legacy, whatever you want to call it. And in that time, I've learned that there are 2 kinds of people in this world. Those who use their power to protect, and those who use it to destroy." He held her gaze. "Vincent Carmine is a destroyer. He's been hurting people for years because no one with the power to stop him cared enough to try." His voice dropped. "I care, and I have the power." Margot's breath caught. "So here's what's going to happen," Graham continued. "You're going to stay here, where you're safe. I'm going to make some calls. And by the end of the week, Vincent Carmine is going to realize that he picked the wrong woman to chase." "And if he comes here?" she whispered. "If he tries to..." "He won't get within 100 yards of this house. I have security that would make the Secret Service jealous." Something almost like a smile touched his mouth. "And even if he did, he'd have to go through me." Margot stared at him. This man she'd met less than 24 hours ago. This stranger who was promising to fight her battles, protect her from monsters, tear down her enemy piece by piece. It didn't make sense. None of it made sense. "Why?" she asked, the word barely audible. "Why are you doing this?" Graham was quiet for a long moment. Then, softly, "Because when my sister needed someone to fight for her, no one did. Not even me." His jaw tightened. "I'm not going to make that mistake again." The silence between them felt heavy, charged with something Margot couldn't name. "Okay," she said finally. "Okay." Graham nodded once. "Good. Now eat your breakfast. You're going to need your strength." The next few days blurred together. Margot stayed in the guest suite, venturing out only for meals and the occasional walk through the gardens with one of Graham's security team trailing at a discreet distance. She felt like a prisoner and a guest at the same time, protected but confined, safe but stir-crazy. Graham was busy. She saw him at meals sometimes, and he'd update her on his progress, conversations with lawyers, meetings with journalists, carefully worded threats to business associates who'd turned a blind eye to Vincent's behavior for too long. But then he'd disappear again into his office or out to meetings, and she'd be alone with her thoughts, which were increasingly about him. She told herself it was normal, natural. He was saving her life. Of course she'd develop feelings. It was gratitude, that was all. Gratitude and proximity, and the intoxicating novelty of being around a man who didn't want anything from her. Except he did want something from her. She just didn't know what. On the fourth night, she couldn't sleep. She wandered downstairs to the library. She'd discovered it on her second day and had been working through the shelves ever since, and found Graham already there. He was sitting in one of the leather chairs, a glass of whiskey in his hand, staring at the fireplace. The flames cast shadows across his face, highlighting the exhaustion she hadn't noticed before. "Can't sleep?" he asked without looking up. "No." She hesitated in the doorway. "I can go. I didn't mean to intrude." "Stay." One word, but the weight of it made her breath catch. She crossed to the chair across from his and sat down. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. "He's fighting back," Graham said finally. Margot's stomach dropped. "What?" "Vincent. He's trying to get ahead of the story, calling in favors, threatening people who were willing to talk." Graham's jaw tightened. "He put out a statement today. Said you're mentally unstable. Said you've been stalking him for years, sending threatening messages, showing up at his events uninvited." The words hit her like physical blows. "That's not, I know." He finally looked at her. "But he's got documentation, fake emails, doctored photos, enough to make people doubt you." Margot felt the ground shifting under her feet. This was how it always went. This was why she'd never gone to the police, never pressed charges, never tried to fight back. Because Vincent was always 3 steps ahead. Because he always had a story ready. Because he'd spent years making sure no one would ever believe her. "Then it's over," she said quietly. "He wins. He always wins." "No." The word was sharp enough to make her look up. Graham leaned forward. "He doesn't win. Not this time. Because this time, he picked a fight with someone who doesn't give up. He has evidence, fabricated evidence, we'll prove it. He has connections. So do I. Better ones. Her voice cracked. He always finds a way. No matter what I do, no matter how hard I fight, he always... Margot." Graham set down his glass and crossed to where she sat. He crouched in front of her, just like that first night, and took her hands in his. His grip was warm, steady, grounding. "Listen to me," he said. "I know you're scared. I know you've been fighting alone for a long time, and it feels like you'll never stop. But you're not alone anymore." His gray eyes held hers. "I'm not going to let him hurt you. I'm not going to let him win. And I need you to trust me. I don't know how to trust anyone." "Then learn." His thumb traced a circle on the back of her hand. "Start with me." Margot looked at him. This man who'd stepped into her nightmare and refused to leave. This stranger who'd become the only solid ground she had. "Why do you care so much?" she whispered. "The truth this time." Graham was silent for a long moment. "Because when I look at you," he said finally, "I see someone who should have been protected. Someone who deserved better than what she got. And He stopped, something shifting in his expression. "I've spent my whole life building walls, keeping people out, telling myself it was safer that way." His jaw tightened. "But then you walked into my house with champagne on your uniform and terror in your eyes, and you looked at me like I was the only thing standing between you and the dark. And I realized," he exhaled slowly, "I realized I didn't want to be safe anymore." Margot's heart was pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. "Graham, you don't have to say anything." He released her hands and stood up, putting distance between them again. "I just needed you to know." He turned toward the door. "Wait." He stopped. Margot stood up. Her legs felt unsteady, her whole body trembling with something that wasn't fear for the first time in 3 years. "You said you wanted me to trust you," she said. "But trust goes both ways." She crossed to him, stopped close enough to see the firelight reflected in his eyes. "I'm not good at this," she said. "I don't know how to be close to someone without waiting for them to hurt me. I don't know how to believe that someone might actually want to protect me instead of control me. She took a breath. But I'm willing to learn, if you're willing to be patient. Something shifted in Graham's expression. Something raw and hungry and carefully restrained. I can be patient, he said quietly. Good. She held his gaze. Then let's take down Vincent Carmine. Together. And when it's over, she swallowed. When it's over, maybe we can figure out the rest. For a long moment, he just looked at her. Then, slowly, he nodded. Together, he said, and for the first time in 3 years, the word didn't feel like a trap. The break came 6 days later. Margot was in the library when Graham found her, reading or trying to, though the words kept blurring on the page. We've got him, he said from the doorway. She looked up. What? Graham crossed to her and held out his phone. On the screen was a video, grainy security footage from what looked like a parking garage. One of his former assistants, Graham said. She kept records, emails, texts, audio recordings of him making threats. And this. Margot watched the video, saw Vincent grab a woman by the arm, shove her against a car, lean in close while she cowered, her stomach turned. This was 2 years ago, Graham continued. The woman tried to file a police report at the time, but it disappeared. Vincent's connections made sure of that. His jaw tightened, but the detective she talked to kept his own copy. Off the books, just in case someone ever came asking. Margot stared at the screen. This is enough? Combined with everything else? Yes. Graham sat down across from her. My lawyers are filing civil suits on behalf of 3 of his victims. The footage and the assistant's records are going to every major news outlet by morning. And the district attorney just agreed to open an investigation into the missing women. The words washed over her like a wave. It was happening. After all these years, all these nightmares, all these moments of looking over her shoulder and waiting for the blow to fall, it was actually happening. He'll fight it, she said. He'll find a way to... He'll try. But his money's already drying up. His business partners are distancing themselves. And once the story breaks... Graham shook his head. He's done, Margot. He just doesn't know it yet. She pressed her hand to her mouth, trying to hold in the sob building in her chest. Hey, Graham moved closer, his hand coming up to cup her face. Hey, it's okay. You're okay. I never thought, her voice broke. I never thought I'd be free of him. I know. I thought I'd spend the rest of my life running, hiding, waiting. She looked up at him through blurred vision. And then you just decided to save me, like it was nothing. It wasn't nothing. His thumb brushed away a tear that had escaped. It was everything. She didn't think, didn't plan. She just leaned forward and pressed her lips to his. Graham went still for 1 heartbeat. 2. Then his hand slid into her hair and he kissed her back. It was soft at first, tentative, questioning. But then something broke open between them. His other arm wrapped around her waist and pulled her closer, and she melted into him, into the warmth and strength and steady certainty of him. When they finally broke apart, they were both breathing hard. I should apologize, Margot whispered. Don't you dare! She laughed, a real laugh, rusty from disuse but genuine. I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to be with someone without being afraid. Then we'll figure it out. Graham rested his forehead against hers. Together. Remember? Together, she repeated, and this time she believed it. The story broke the next morning. Margot watched from the safety of Graham's study as Vincent Carmine's world collapsed. News vans outside his office. Cameras in his face as he tried to leave his apartment. Former friends and colleagues issuing statements of shock and condemnation. Within 48 hours, he'd been arrested. Within a week, 3 more women had come forward. Within a month, he was sitting in a jail cell, denied bail, awaiting trial for stalking, assault, and conspiracy charges that could put him away for decades. Margot kept waiting for the relief to hit, kept waiting for the moment when she'd finally feel safe, finally breathe easy, finally stop flinching at unexpected sounds. It didn't come all at once. It came in pieces. It came when she walked through the garden without a security escort and realized no one was following her. It came when she called her mother for the first time in 3 years and heard her cry with relief. It came when Graham asked her to stay, not in the guest suite, but with him, in his life, in whatever this thing was they were building together. And she said yes, without hesitation. And it came, finally, on a quiet evening, 3 months later. They were in the library, their library now, she thought of it, sitting by the fire with glasses of wine. Graham had been quiet all night, distracted, and Margot had learned to give him space when he got like that. But then he set down his glass and turned to face her. "I need to tell you something," he said. Her stomach tightened. "Okay. When you came to me that night, champagne on your uniform, terror in your eyes, I told myself I was helping you because it was the right thing to do. Because Vincent was a monster and someone needed to stop him." He paused, but that wasn't the whole truth. Margot waited. "The truth," Graham said slowly, "is that I saw you and I felt something I hadn't felt in years, maybe ever. I looked at you and I thought, there she is." His gray eyes held hers, like I'd been waiting for you without knowing it. Her breath caught. "I know it's fast," he continued. "I know you've been through hell and the last thing you need is pressure. But I need you to know." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. "I need you to know that I love you. I love your strength and your courage, and your terrible taste in library books." She laughed, even as tears spilled down her cheeks. "I love that you're learning to trust again. I love that you let me in." He opened the box. Inside was a ring, simple, elegant, a single diamond catching the firelight. "And I want to spend the rest of my life making sure you never feel unsafe again." Margot stared at the ring, stared at this man who had waded into her nightmare and refused to leave. "Graham, you don't have to answer now. You don't have to answer ever if you're not ready. I just needed you to know where I stand." He paused. "I'm not going anywhere, Margot. Whatever you decide." She thought of all the years she'd spent running, all the times she'd told herself she'd never let anyone close again, never trust again, never love again. She thought of how terrifying it was to choose differently. And then she thought of Graham, his steadiness, his patience, the way he looked at her like she was something precious instead of something broken. "Yes," she said. He blinked. "Yes?" "Yes, I'll marry you." She laughed, tears streaming down her face. "Yes, yes, yes." Graham's composure cracked. He pulled her into his arms and kissed her, deep and fierce and full of promise, and Margot kissed him back with everything she had. When they finally broke apart, he slid the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly. "I love you," she said. "I don't think I said that." "You didn't." He smiled, a real smile, rare and blinding. "But I knew." Margot looked down at the ring, at this symbol of a future she'd never let herself imagine. "I'm still scared sometimes," she admitted. "I still wake up in the middle of the night thinking he's found me." "I know." Graham took her hand. "But when you wake up scared, I'll be there. And I'll remind you that you're safe, that you're loved, that you never have to run again. Promise. Promise." She leaned into him, her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, steady and strong, and hers. Outside the night was dark and quiet. Inside the fire crackled warmly, casting dancing shadows across the walls of the library. And Margot Ellison, who had been so many things in her life, victim, survivor, runner, finally became something new. She became home. 1 year later. The ballroom was full of people, flowers everywhere, White roses, gardenias, cascading arrangements that filled the air with sweetness. Music drifting from the string quartet in the corner. Guests in elegant clothes, champagne flutes in hand, all of them here to celebrate. Margot stood at the top of the grand staircase, looking down at the crowd. Her mother was there, crying happy tears into a handkerchief. Graham's business associates were mingling, looking slightly uncomfortable in their formal wear, but smiling nonetheless. Even the detective who'd kept those records all those years, who'd helped bring Vincent to justice, had come. And at the bottom of the stairs, waiting for her, was Graham. He was wearing a dark suit, perfectly tailored, but his bow tie was already slightly loose. His gray eyes tracked her every movement as she descended, and the expression on his face made her heart flip. He looked at her like she was the only person in the room, like she was the only person in the world. When she reached him, he took her hand and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "Ready?" he murmured. She smiled. "I've been ready." They turned to face the officiant, the crowd quieting around them. The ceremony was simple, honest. No grand gestures or elaborate vows, just two people promising to choose each other, protect each other, love each other for as long as they had. When the officiant said, "You may kiss the bride," Graham cupped her face in his hands and kissed her like they were the only two people on earth. The crowd erupted in applause. Later, after the dinner and the toasts and the first dance, Margot slipped away to the terrace for a breath of fresh air. The night was warm, the stars bright overhead, and she leaned against the railing and let out a long, slow breath. Arms wrapped around her from behind. "Escaping already?" Graham's voice was low in her ear. She leaned back into him. "Just taking a moment. It's been a lot. Good a lot or bad a lot. Good. Overwhelming, but good." She turned in his arms to face him. "I keep waiting to wake up." "You're not dreaming." "I know. But a year ago, I was sleeping in a studio apartment with 3 locks on the door and a knife under my pillow. And now..." She gestured at the glittering ballroom behind them. "Now I'm here. With you. And he's in prison. And I'm safe. And I just..." Her voice broke. Graham pulled her close, his chin resting on top of her head. "You built this," he said quietly. "You survived. You kept going. You chose to trust when everything in you was screaming not to. That was all you. You helped. I just gave you a safe place to land. Everything else?" He pulled back to look at her. "That was you, Margot. All you." She looked up at this man who had become her partner, her protector, her home. "I love you," she said. "I love you, too." He kissed her forehead. "Now, come dance with me. It's our wedding. We should at least pretend to enjoy it." She laughed, that real laugh that came so much easier now, and let him lead her back inside. The rest of the night passed in a blur of music and laughter and stolen kisses. When the last guests finally left and they were alone in the empty ballroom, Graham pulled her into his arms one more time. "So," he said. "Mrs. Ashford," she smiled. "That's going to take some getting used to. You've got time." He pressed his lips to her hair. "We've got all the time in the world." Margot closed her eyes and let herself believe it. Outside, the sun was starting to rise, painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. A new day, a new life, a new beginning. And this time, she wasn't afraid. The call came 3 weeks after the honeymoon. Margot was in the kitchen, making coffee, still getting used to calling this sprawling estate home, when her phone buzzed on the counter. She glanced at the screen, expecting Graham. He'd left early for a meeting downtown, but the number was unfamiliar. She answered anyway. "Hello? Mrs. Ashford?" A woman's voice, tight with barely controlled panic. "My name is Detective Diane Holloway. I'm calling from the county prosecutor's office." Margot's hand tightened on the phone. "Yes?" "I'm afraid I have some difficult news." A pause. "Vincent Carmine escaped custody this morning." The words didn't register. Couldn't register. Because if they registered, that meant... "That's not possible," Margot heard herself say. He was in maximum security. He was denied bail. There was a transfer to a medical facility. Appendicitis, they said. The detective's voice was grim. Turned out to be faked. He had people on the inside. By the time anyone realized what was happening, he was gone. The coffee cup slipped from Margot's fingers and shattered on the floor. She didn't feel the hot liquid splashing her ankles. Didn't hear the detective asking if she was still there. All she could hear was the blood rushing in her ears, and underneath it, Vincent's voice from 3 years ago. "If you run again, I won't bother bringing you back. I'll just make sure no one ever finds you." "Mrs. Ashford?" The detective's voice cut through the static. "Mrs. Ashford, I need you to listen to me. We have units on the way to your residence. We're going to find him, but in the meantime, I need you to stay inside, lock all the doors, and wait for your security team to—" The line went dead. Margot stared at the phone, tried to call back. Nothing. Tried Graham, straight to voicemail. And then she heard it. A sound from upstairs. Soft. Deliberate. Footsteps. Her whole body went cold. He's already here. Margot's training kicked in. 3 years of survival instincts honed razor sharp. She didn't scream. Didn't freeze. She moved silent and fast toward the service entrance at the back of the kitchen. She made it 3 steps before the voice stopped her. "Hello, Margot?" He was standing in the doorway, blocking her exit. Thinner than she remembered, pale from months in a cell, but those eyes, those flat, empty eyes, were exactly the same. Vincent smiled. It didn't reach his face. "Did you miss me?" Every instinct screamed at her to run, but there was nowhere to go. He was between her and the door, and even if she made it past him, even if she got outside, he'd chase her. He'd always chase her. So she did the only thing she could. She stood her ground. "You shouldn't be here," she said. Her voice came out steadier than she expected. "The police are on their way." Graham's security is currently dealing with a small fire in the East Wing." Vincent's smile widened. Nothing serious, just enough to keep them busy. Margot's blood turned to ice. "As for the police," he checked his watch. "They're about 15 minutes out, which gives us plenty of time to talk. I have nothing to say to you." "No?" He stepped closer. She stepped back. "You took everything from me, Margot. My business, my reputation, my freedom. Don't you think I deserve an explanation?" "I didn't take anything. You destroyed yourself." Something flickered in his eyes. Something dangerous. "I built an empire," he said softly. "I had money, power, respect. And then you walked into that party and ruined it all." Another step closer. "Do you know what they did to me in prison? The things they said? The things You put yourself there." Margot's hands were shaking, but she kept her voice firm. "Every woman you hurt, every life you destroyed, that was all you." Vincent's jaw tightened. "I loved you." "You don't know what love is." For a moment, something almost human flickered across his face. Pain, confusion. The genuine bewilderment of a man who had never understood why the world wouldn't bend to his will. Then it was gone, replaced by something cold and final. "You're right," he said. "I don't." He lunged. Margot scrambled backward, but he was faster. He was always faster. And his hand closed around her wrist like a vice. She twisted, fought, drove her elbow toward his face, but he caught it and wrenched her arm behind her back. Pain shot through her shoulder. She gasped. 3 years, Vincent hissed in her ear. 3 years I've been waiting for this, thinking about this, planning this. His grip tightened until she cried out. "Did you really think you could just walk away, start a new life, be happy?" "Let me go." "You don't get to be happy, Margot. Not after what you did to me. Not ever." His free hand came up toward her throat. And then, the gunshot was deafening. Vincent's grip vanished. Margot stumbled forward, ears ringing, and spun around in time to see him crumple to the floor. He wasn't dead. The bullet had hit his shoulder, and he was clutching it, screaming, blood seeping between his fingers. Standing in the kitchen doorway, gun still raised, was Graham. His face was white. His hands were steady. "Get away from my wife," he said. His voice was quiet, controlled, absolutely lethal. Vincent looked up at him, and for the first time since she'd known him, Margot saw real fear in his eyes. You shot me." "I'll do it again if you move." Graham crossed to Margot without taking his eyes off Vincent. His free hand found hers and gripped it tight. "Are you hurt?" he asked, low and urgent. No, how did you—" "Security alerted me the second the perimeter was breached. I was already on my way back when the fire started." His jaw tightened. "I should have been here sooner." "You were here in time." She squeezed his hand. "That's what matters." Sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Vincent was still on the floor, groaning, his blood pooling on the marble tiles. Graham kept the gun trained on him. "You know," he said conversationally, "I've spent the last year building a case against you. Testimonies, financial records, evidence that would put you away for the rest of your life." He paused. "But I have to admit, this is more satisfying." Vincent's face twisted with hate. "You think this is over? You think I don't have people who— Your people are gone, Vincent. Your money's gone. Your connections are gone." Graham's voice was ice. "You have nothing left. No one's coming to save you." The sirens were loud now, right outside. Doors slammed. Voices shouted. "The difference between you and me," Graham said quietly, "is that I don't need to hurt people to feel powerful. I don't need to control them, or own them, or break them." He looked at Margot, and something in his expression softened. "I just need to protect the people I love, and I will do that, whatever it takes, for the rest of my life." Police flooded into the kitchen. Paramedics. Security. The room erupted into chaos, shouting, movement, hands pulling Vincent up and dragging him away. But Margot barely noticed. She was looking at Graham. At this man who had done exactly what he'd promised. Who had stood between her and the monster. Who had chosen her, protected her, loved her, not because she was weak, but because she was worth fighting for. "Thank you," she whispered. He pulled her into his arms and held her so tight she could barely breathe. "I told you," he said against her hair. "I'm not going anywhere." Vincent Carmine was convicted 6 months later. The escape attempt added years to his sentence. The assault on Margot added more. By the time the judge finished reading the charges— stalking, assault, conspiracy, attempted kidnapping, flight from custody— the number was so high, it didn't matter. He would die, in prison. Margot sat in the courtroom and watched him being led away in handcuffs. He didn't look at her, didn't look at anyone. He just disappeared. And for the first time in her life, she felt the weight lift completely. That night, she and Graham sat on the terrace, looking out at the gardens. The same gardens where she'd once walked with a security escort, afraid of her own shadow. The same gardens where she'd started to believe that maybe, just maybe, she could have a life again. "How do you feel?" Graham asked. Margot considered the question, really considered it. "Free," she said finally. "I feel free." He took her hand. "Good." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the stars emerge one by one. "I've been thinking," Margot said eventually. "Dangerous." She laughed. "I've been thinking about what comes next, now that it's really over." Graham turned to look at her. "And? I want to help people. Women like me. Women who are trapped, who think they have no way out." She paused. "I want to create something. A foundation, maybe. Resources, legal aid, safe houses. A way for people to get out and stay out." Graham was quiet for a moment. Then, I think that's the best idea I've ever heard. Yeah? Yeah, he squeezed her hand. And I know exactly how to fund it. Margot smiled. This man, this impossible, wonderful man. I love you, she said. I love you too. He kissed her knuckles. Now let's go change some lives. 2 years later. The Ashford Foundation opened its doors on a bright morning in May. It was a beautiful building, welcoming and warm, designed to feel nothing like the institutions that failed so many victims. Inside were offices for lawyers, counselors, advocates, rooms where women could sleep safely, resources to help them rebuild. Margot stood in the lobby on opening day, watching the first visitors come through the doors. A young woman with a split lip and terrified eyes. A mother holding a toddler on her hip. An elderly woman who kept looking over her shoulder like she expected someone to grab her. Margot knew those looks. She'd worn them herself. She walked over to the young woman with the split lip and offered her hand. Hi, she said. I'm Margot. You're safe here. The woman's eyes filled with tears. I didn't know where else to go. You came to the right place. Margot guided her toward one of the counselors. We're going to help you. Whatever you need. That evening, after the crowds had gone and the building was quiet, Margot found Graham waiting for her in the parking lot. He was leaning against his car, arms crossed, watching her with that look, the one that still made her heart flip after all this time. How was the first day? He asked. Hard. She walked into his arms. Important. I'm proud of you. I couldn't have done it without you. Yes, you could. He pulled back to look at her. You could have done anything, Margot. Survived anything. Become anything. I just got lucky enough to be here for it. She kissed him, soft and slow and full of everything she still couldn't quite put into words. When they broke apart, he rested his forehead against hers. Ready to go home? He asked. Margot looked back at the foundation, at this place she'd built from her pain, this proof that something beautiful could grow from the worst moments of her life. Then she looked at Graham, her partner, her protector, her home. Yeah, she said. I'm ready. They drove away together into the evening, the sun setting behind them, the road ahead wide open, and Margot Ellison Ashford, who had been a victim, a survivor, a runner, a wife, and now a protector of others, finally understood what it meant to be truly free. Not the absence of fear, but the presence of courage, of love, of purpose. The knowledge that no matter what came next, she would never face it alone. And that was enough. That was everything.